The report of the Special Study Group, letter of transmittal, to the convener of this group. Attached is the report of the Special Studies Group, established by in August 1963, the first, to consider the problems involved in this contingency of a transition to a general condition of peace, and to recommended procedures for dealing with its contingency. For the convenience of non-technical readers, we have elected to submit our statistical supporting data, totaling 604 exhibits, separately, as well as a preliminary manual of the peace games methods devised during the course of our study. We have completed our assignment to the best of our ability, subject to the limitations of time and resources available to us. Our conclusions of fact and our recommendations are unanimous. Those of us who differ in certain secondary respects from the findings set forth herein do not consider these differences sufficient to warrant the filing of a minority report. It is our earnest hope that the fruits of our deliberations will be of value to our government in its efforts to provide leadership to the nation in solving the complex and far-reaching problems we have examined, and that our recommendations for subsequent presidential action in this area will be adopted. Because of the unusual circumstances surrounding the establishment of this group, and in view of the nature of its findings, we do not recommend that this report be released for publication. It is our affirmative judgment that such action would not be in the public interest. The uncertain advantages of public discussion of our conclusions and recommendations are, in our opinion, greatly outweighed by the clear and predictable danger of a crisis in public confidence, which untimely publication of this report might be expected to provoke. The likelihood that a lay reader, unexposed to the exigencies of higher political or military responsibility, will misconstrue the purpose of this project, and the intent of its participants, seems obvious. We urge that circulation of this report be closely restricted to those whose responsibilities require that they be appraised of its contents. We deeply regret that the necessity of enmity, a prerequisite to our group's unhindered pursuit of its objectives, precludes proper acknowledgment of our gratitude to the many persons in and out of government who contributed so greatly to our work. For the Special Study Group, signature withheld for publication. 30th of September, 1966. Introduction. The report which follows summarizes the results of a 2.5-year study of the broad problems to be anticipated in the event of a general transformation of American society to a condition lacking its most critical current characteristics, its capability and readiness to make war when doing so is judged necessary or desirable by its political leadership. Our work has been predicted on the belief that some kind of general peace may soon be negotiable. The de facto admission of Communist China into the United Nations now appears to be only a few years away at most. It has become increasingly manifest that conflicts of American national interest with those of China and the Soviet Union are susceptible of political solution, despite the superficial contradictions of the current Vietnam War. Of the threats of an attack on China, and of the necessarily hostile tenor of day-to-day foreign policy statements, it is also obvious that differences involving other nations can be readily resolved by the three great powers whenever they arrive at a stable peace among themselves. It is not necessary, for the purposes of our study, to assume that a general detente of this sort will come about, and we make no such argument, only that it might. It is surely no exaggeration to say that a condition of general world peace would lead to changes in the social structures of the nations of the world of unparalleled and revolutionary magnitude. The economic impact of general disarmament, to name only the most obvious consequences of peace, would revise the production and distribution patterns of the globe to a degree that would make changes of the past 50 years seem insignificant. Political, sociological, cultural, and ecological changes would be equally far-reaching. What has motivated our society of these contingencies has been the growing sense of thoughtful men in and out of government that the world is totally unprepared to meet the demands of such a situation. We had originally planned, when our study was initiated, to address ourselves to these two broad questions and their components. What can be expected if peace comes, and what should we be prepared to do about it? But as our investigation proceeded, it became apparent that certain other questions had to be faced. What, for instance, are the real functions of war in modern societies, beyond the ostensible ones of defending and advancing national interests of nations? In the absence of war, what other institutes exist or might be devised to fulfill these functions? Granting that a peaceful settlement of disputes is within the range of current international relationships, is the abolition of war, in the broad sense, really possible? If so, is it necessarily desirable in terms of social stability? If not, what can be done to improve the operation of our social systems in respect to its war readiness? The word peace, as we have used it in the following pages, describes a permanent, or quasi-permanent, condition entirely free from the national exercise, or contemplation, of any form of the organized social violence, or threat of violence, generally known as war. It implies total and general disarmament. It is not used to describe the more familiar condition of Cold War or armed peace, or other mere respite, long or short, from armed conflict. Nor is it used simply as a synonym for the political settlement of international differences. The magnitude of modern means of mass destruction and the speed of modern communications require the unqualified working definition given above. Only a generation ago, such an absolute description would have seemed utopian rather than pragmatic. Today, any modification of this definition would render it almost worthless for our purposes. By the same standard, we have used to work war to apply interchangeably to conventional hot war, to the general condition of war preparedness or war readiness, and to the general war system. The sense intended is made clear in context. The first section of our report deals with its scope and with the assumptions on which our study was based. The second considers the effects of disarmament on the economy, the subject of most peace research to date. The third takes up so-called disarmament scenarios, which have been proposed. The fourth, fifth, and sixth examine the non-military functions of war and the problems they raise for a viable transition to peace. Here will be formed some indications of the true dimensions of the problem, not previously conditioned in any other study. In the seventh section we summarize our findings, and in the eighth we set forth our recommendations of what we believe to be practical and necessary course of action.